When I first picked up this 180-day curriculum, I was curious because it's one of the most affordable options out there, and I was really curious if it could really be all-inclusive for our third grader. So I've spent some time going through everything here that's been provided, all of these subjects that were gifted to me, and I would like to talk about a few things with you. So a couple of the things that this comes with that I really appreciate are this cursive flashcards, the division flashcards, the multiplication flashcards. Those are pretty straightforward. The cursive is kind of fun. So as you can see here, you could use a string or maybe even a whiteboard marker. They could learn to read the words and then practice the A on each of these like cursive letters. So we have word practice on one side and then actual letter practice here on the other side. So that is so fun. I hadn't seen anything like that. And I think that these extra cards here are super important or useful, especially with the way that this curriculum is designed. So first off, let's talk about, there's a STEM in this kit. There's a reading, there's a math, there's a third grade language arts, there's a science, there's a social studies, there's a writing, there's a spelling and word study, geography, and problem solving. So it includes all of the subjects that a public school kid would encounter throughout the day. So I really appreciate that everything's here in the book. The other thing that I really appreciate as we get started digging in here, we're going to start here with reading, and I actually like how manageable each lesson feels here. So they always have this introduction, how the days and the weeks work, but they are very predictive in their patterns. So the third grader would be not overwhelmed here looking at this one paragraph here and then some question and answer after. And then of course you have an answer key. So each one of these, and sometimes they get longer, sometimes you get more writing here after you read. Here's an example of a longer one and some questions. Very straightforward. Sometimes once in a while the book, the answers were kind of confusing, even here as an adult would be my only thing. And they're not really ever teaching reading strategies. They're just providing your opportunity to read and to answer this question. So moving on to math. Okay, so talking about math here, it's the same kind of idea. You have one sheet a day. That is very underwhelming for a kid. I feel like a kiddo is not going to get overwhelmed by one page. So you have about 10 questions. There isn't really much teaching in this curriculum. So that is one thing you really have to pay attention to is what do I need to teach that my kid hasn't seen today? But one thing I do like is number one has similar patterns. Number 6 has similar patterns. Like each one of these numbers aligns with like the types of questions that they're asked. So you can see that here on this page. And then it gives you a place to keep score. And then I believe in one of these books, I think it's this book, towards the end, it has like a reading log and some math logs. So you could really keep track of what your kid's learning and what areas they're struggling with. So I really appreciate that. I don't know that I don't love that there isn't like a teaching section or like a new idea. And I think a weakness of this is like, we're practicing all kinds of things every day versus like really nailing down addition or nailing down time or whatever it is. But it is circular. So you're going to see like time every day. So they kind of get the practice. It's just not all in one day. So that could be a problem that you could encounter. Moving on to language arts, where you're going to be focused on capitalization, punctuation, parts of speech, and spelling. Same kind of concept where it's just a page a day, and it's going to be kind of circular in the topics. Questions 1 and 2 typically focus on this skill, 3 and 5, this skill, 6, this kind of skill as you move throughout the year. And then it does have a chart, especially if you're doing this for more than one kiddo. Oh gosh, I just had it. Where again, you can keep track of what they got right and wrong. And then you could identify patterns in your kiddo like, hey, they're always missing punctuation or they're always missing this kind of thing. Again, it's really weak on actually teaching any kind of concept. However, it would be great as an extra practice. There's all kinds of things that this would be great for. Or maybe you're an experienced mom or an experienced English teacher, and this would be really easy for you to sit down. I mean, it's fairly straightforward even now. I'm not necessarily an English teacher, but I could easily help a kiddo through this each and every day. So I think that you could get them started and they could work independently. Okay, so moving on to the actual science curriculum here. Again, same idea, one page, little blip of information, some questions about it. I don't know that I'd necessarily use this as my sole piece of science information, but it is like a great way to get topic ideas and get started. So you could add in YouTube videos, you could add in some library books, maybe you could find some quick experiments, because there's always easy experiments to do online with this stuff. But this would be great just to sit down with your kiddos. I actually plan to use it as our science, as like themes each week that we go through with my older kids to younger kids, kind of morphing it into family study. So that's one thing I'm finding very interesting about this curriculum is it is very basic, but also very morphable depending on how much effort and time you want to put into it. So you could honestly, let's say you're talking about these finch. You could spend a lot of time talking about the finch, even outside of this worksheet, looking up videos, looking at behaviors, all kinds of things, why their beaks are shaped that way. It's so versatile, I guess is what I'm trying to say. All right, one thing I super love about this 180 days of practice from Shell is this STEM here. This is fun. So there's two ways that you can go through it. You could do week, day, learn content, explore content, get creative, analyze the data, and just kind of build from there each week. Or you could say week 1, day 1, this is what I'm going to do. Week 1, day 2, this is what I'm going to do. So this would take a longer amount of time. This takes more time and more days to go through each unit. So for example, here is unit 2, you're studying heat energy, you're getting some information and a challenge, some questions, and then you can kind of create some stuff. Here it has what the materials you'll need per group and where to find them and what's flexible in that. So everything is like very straightforward. You just have to spend some time at the beginning of each unit collecting your materials. And so it does a good job talking about different standards and the standards you're meeting, so you can kind of see the big picture of where you're headed. Again, very straightforward, it gets you started, and there's always opportunity to go deeper. This year in the 3rd grade, 180 days of social studies, you're focusing on civics, economy, geography, and history, which there is actually a geography book included. So that's kind of nice that they're working together here. Sorry, I'm going to get rid of some of that. And again, you just go through each day. It's very open to go, not like super deep information. However, it's information, and you can get started, and you're actually getting your kids to think about it, especially in 3rd grade. You're really just trying to introduce a lot of concepts. And the same with geography. We're focusing on like location, environment, region, those kinds of things. Mostly, it looks like mostly in America. So again, one page, open and go. I love it. Then we have writing. We have just 3 left here. We have writing and your spelling. So with writing, you're giving these different prompts. It like really does a nice job of having variety for each day. And then you can go through, at the end, there's the answer key and the rubric for each of this. And then spelling words. So day 1, here's your word bank, and you're going to work on these kinds of words in different orders every single day. And then at the end, you could go ahead and do a spelling test on your own. But here's like each week you get your words, and then you get to manipulate them every single day. So I love that you're getting the repeating of them, but not just straight rewriting them. You get to actually engage with the words. And one of my favorite books of the whole thing is Problem Solving, where you're starting to think, plan, solve, and explain. So you're building on almost like a deeper level of thinking. And so each week it has your themes. Here's what I'm excited about, the 180 days of problem solving. Each week it's giving you a main theme, and it lets you include in right away. So week 1 is using place value to understanding rounding whole numbers to the nearest 10th or 100th. So what that actually looks like practically is day 1, they ask you some questions to think about these numbers. What's the greatest number you can make with these, and how do you know? And then the next day they just kind of build on that. What's your plan? Like having you thinking about your actual thinking, solving the problem, putting it in the context of a number line. And then you just keep building every single day to the point where you're given this, and then you have to show your thinking. So I love that they start really simple, and then they have you engage with the similar concept over and over in different ways until you're built up to the goal. So that is so fun. And the last thing I'd like to talk about here is this feelings jar. I actually think it would be great. One, your children are learning different vocab to help explain what they might actually be feeling. Maybe sometimes they feel rejected, but they didn't actually know how to verbalize that. You could play fun games of like, tell me a time where you felt grateful. Tell me a time when you felt ungrateful. Tell me about when you were self-conscious. I think it could be an excellent conversation starter with your kiddos, maybe to like feel like a point of connection before you even start doing school. So let's explain what distraught means, or maybe find a word that's like distraught, but not distraught. So maybe distraught and distressed, how those are similar and how those are different, or distraught and sad, how they're related. So I think it could really give like kids more vocabulary for their words. It could help them become articulate and understand these words better, and also related to our feelings. And inside the jar here, maybe you can kind of see it. They have different ways to play and different ways to use this and when to use it. So if you are looking for a curriculum that for the most part is open and go, very simplistic, a little of everything each day, but by the end you've circled around to everything, or like a launching pad or extra practice, this would be a great fit for you. Again, I've already illustrated it's a little weaker in like teaching time. So you'd really have to pay attention to kind of what the kid's learning, or have a kiddo that's like, hey, I don't know what this is, and then be able to teach them in that time. So that could be a weakness as a parent when you're looking at an open and go curriculum. But overall, I'm excited to use it this year.